sneeze, I'll have COVID.
I call to order the June 30th special called business meeting. It's the end of year matters. Would you all rise for the pledge of allegiance, please? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First thing up is going to be the agenda approval for today. We need to make an adjustment to the agenda. We're going to add some board chair and board member observations, which is not on this agenda, but I will take a motion for that. We're going to add it right after, we'll add it right after consent, like before old business, like we normally do.
I move that we approve the agenda with the addition of board chair and board member observations.
You want a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's approved.
So we have to do voice vote.
We probably do have to do voice votes. So, Mr. Egoff, yes or no?
Yes.
You were second, but yes or no?
Yes.
Yes or no, Ms. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Ms. Corn?
Yes.
Ms. Case?
Yes.
Yes for myself. Thank you, Mr. Rector. Next up is going to be the consent agenda. I'll take a motion on that. You ready?
Ms. Corn, move we approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Wood, second.
All right, Mr. Egoff, yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Absher?
Yes.
Ms. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Ms. Corn?
Yeah.
Ms. Case?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So let's move on to board chair observations. What I'm going to do today is, at our last board meeting, we directed staff to come up with a statement that we believe really addresses some of the racial upheaval and things that are going on in our nation right now. To kind of put out a statement that the Henderson County Board of Publication can get behind and can really tell how we feel. So I'm going to go ahead and read this, and then we'll have that posted on there as well. This is an important message from the Board of Public Education, Superintendent, and Henderson County Education Foundation. Like others across the nation and the world, our community is reeling from the acts of violence and systemic racism that continue to create a massive divide in our society. We condemn racism, violence, and discrimination in the strongest terms. They are directly opposed to the values of Henderson County Public Schools and our mission statement, which is our promise to the children and families we serve. Our role as educators is to create conversation and to take the position of listening to the hurt, the confusion, and the pain of our students, families, and staff to promote healing and change in our schools and community. We seek to unite educators and families while fostering a positive influence on the community beyond education. We seek to cultivate a community whose bedrock are kindness, acceptance, and inclusion for all. Only through our collective work can we create a way forward in dismantling racism and other negative influences that affect our school community and nation. It is our shared responsibility to ensure that every student is protected and that all students know they are loved. We know that the most powerful lessons we teach are the product of our actions and not just our words. We must all work to address the injustices that exist within education and beyond by the conversations we have with others, by speaking up when we see hate, by supporting efforts that oppose racism and oppression, and by directly engaging in advocacy work. Our every action will shape the future that our children will inherit. Henderson County Public Schools is committed to shaping a future of integrity, respect, inclusivity, and justice for all. So thank you for taking a few minutes for letting me read that. I want to add on to that just a little bit. When we were talking about putting out a statement, I think statements and resolutions and all that can have a positive impact, but I think they're just words, and words without actions are to me can be meaningless. And what I'd like to do is start to have the conversation with this board, as well as our leadership staff, to start putting together monthly information for us that we can see as far as testing differences between our different racial groups and making sure that we can really bridge those gaps. I also want to see summaries of suspension rates between our Hispanic, our African American, Pacific Islander, Asian, and our Caucasian kids, and see those differences so that we can learn and see if there's anything that we can do better. And also make sure that we are attracting qualified, diverse folks to our staff that look like our kids. And I want to see action steps on how we're going to achieve those gaps, how we're going to close those gaps. And so, Mr. Superintendent, I would like for you and your staff to start putting together, starting with the July meeting, on how we are to present that information to us. I want to see that on a monthly basis, that we are making positive steps to really bridge those gaps.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Gregory.
Thank you.
And you're exactly right. You know, go back to my grandmother, actions speak louder than words. And as a leadership team, we're committed. And I look at it exactly why you say the three areas, human resources. What are we doing and how can we attract and making sure that we get everything what we need to do in the human resources area. And discipline, I already talked to Dr. Bryant. We're going to, we already track it, and I take the blame that we should inform you more about this than we have been already on
Sure.
what we're currently doing. And our biggest is the achievement gaps for all groups. And Dr. King, if you don't mind, just very quick, I just want to give a little synopsis on where we've already started talking about.
That'd be great.
Is because for us, where it's going to start is not actions as much as we're going to start listening. I
Absolutely.
think that's where our first step truly needs to be. And we want to work with some groups and listen to see what's out there, to see what we need to do before we just start putting things on paper and pencil. And I think that is truly our first step. But Dr. King, if you don't mind.
Would you mind coming down, Dr. King, for a second? Mr. Sosha, would you?
Because achievement gap for us is the one that we really, I mean, yes, they're all important, don't get me wrong, but when we start looking at different types of groups and equity throughout our schools, this is one that we really are concentrating and making sure that what we do. Dr. King?
Absolutely. We do every year look at disaggregated data. So we do everything from compare our males and females to compare our subgroup data for different ethnicities. And we do indeed have achievement gaps across our district. And so some of what we've been doing in terms of addressing those has been very strategic. We've had some schools who have, for example, where the achievement gap is greatest with Hispanic students. They've been doing book studies and some embedded work in their PLCs. But we haven't informed you of that, and I share Mr. Caldwell's regret with that we haven't shared with you and the public as much some of the things we are doing to address those achievement gaps. We have been having book studies across the district. We've also done a lot of work with just looking at data. Last summer, we received some extra federal funds specifically geared towards schools that had achievement gaps, and we brought teachers in to look student by student, cume folder by cume folder, testing history by testing history, to figure out how can we be more individualized in our approach to closing those achievement gaps. Some of the work we're doing now, I've had, I guess this morning was my 4th meeting with a kind of an organic subgroup of folks who are looking at the national conversation on this, and they're interested in a school system conversation. We were looking at some potential book studies, but also the real deep dive work of examining our assignments, examining the models that we give when we put up a famous scientist.
Yeah.
Do those scientists represent all ethnicities? When we choose text for reading passages, are we choosing texts that are representative of all of our students? So we know we have work to do. We've started that work, but we haven't done enough, and we're committed to doing more.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
So you can see, board, that we're just at the top of the iceberg, and it's huge.
Yeah.
Now, I want to say this, that there's nothing out there that we can do just one time that's going to fix this. Because if there is, everybody would have done it. But you have our commitment, and what we're going to do is we're going to work as hard as we can. And it's got to grow almost from up.
Sure.
For us to start dictating things, forcing people to do this, then a lot of times that's not truly how change works. Change has got to take place when people believe in the change and want to change. And that's where our goal is as leadership, is to use our leadership abilities to get our staff and our children to grow together.
No, I completely agree, and I appreciate everything you guys have said. You know, we've talked about this privately a lot, to be honest, over the last couple of years, even with NAACP and Ms. Lawrence, and I think it's the conversation in our country is shifting. We're seeing a seismic shift right now, and I think it is our responsibility as an elected board and you guys as a leadership team of 13,500 kids and 1,500 employees, and to make sure that we are moving in that progressive direction through listening and through learning, and making sure that we're not leaving any of our kids behind that don't need to be left. That they should, none of them should be left behind. But just to make sure.
In addition to the raw data that
Yeah.
you can get from test scores and numbers for ISS and OSS, I think there's something to be gained, especially as we begin with just organic discussions, and shared with us
Absolutely.
the kinds of things that you are learning from those teachers as you listen, and as they reflect, I'm assuming, on their actions and the classroom atmosphere. I would like to hear more than just the data. We've been seeing the data about this achievement gap for years now. That's important, and I'm not saying I don't want to see that, but I do want to hear some of the organic kinds of things that you hear that we don't.
The what are we doing? The how's it working? What's working better?
And
I appreciate it.
I think there needs to be some conversations that probably are a little painful to happen to amongst our staff. You know, I see all over Facebook, I don't have white privilege. I'm white, but I worked hard for what I have. And I have that sentiment and that feeling kind of, but I read something from my friend Pauline Carpenter, put it up yesterday, and it was that your white privilege is more that, you know, they were slaves, and then, you know, the law was passed, and then they were suppressed and they couldn't vote, and then the law was passed. But that whole time, the white man was still moving forward and progressing and passing wealth down to their children and so on and so forth. Well, they couldn't vote and they couldn't, you know, do all of these things. And so it really opened my eyes to what white privilege isn't saying, like I have more because I'm white. It's just been the history that my lineage has had has been way different. So I think if we can find some ways to have conversations with our staff, and then it will trickle down, you know, to our students as well, but just kind of maybe teaching on what that is, and really what especially Black males go through with being profiled and pulled over and yanked out of the car. And, you know, my son talks about it a lot, that, you know, he's been pulled over and there was a Black male in his car and they yanked him out and treated him completely different, and then wanted to know who Christian's parents were. And I'm like, what? You know, just so, and they probably had it wrong. They probably should have been yanking my kid out. You know, I mean, I'm just going to be honest. And so I think we need to somehow start those kind of conversations so that we can understand more as the majority here in our school districts, what our other colleagues are going through, and then what our students are going through too. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Owen, you're exactly right. I had a teacher that I had this conversation, and she sent an email, and in the gist, it's amazing what you can learn simply by listening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our first step. That is our first action step, is to start listening, and listening more than we've ever listened before.
Thank you. And so I know this is kind of a weird poor chair observation that we had right here, but I like to open it up to you guys. If you guys have any other observations that you'd like to make, you're welcome to make them.
So I do, mine is different than race. The title of what I'm going to read is U.S. Pediatricians Call for In-Person School This Fall. And this document was written yesterday, June 29th, 2020. The nation's pediatricians have come out with a strong statement in favor of bringing children back to the classroom this fall, wherever and whenever they can do so safely. The American Academy of Pediatrics guidance strongly advocates that all policy consideration for the coming school year should start with a goal of having students physically present in school. The guidance says schools are fundamental to child and adolescent development and well-being. The AAP cites mounting evidence that transmission of the coronavirus by young children is uncommon, partly because they are less likely to contract it in the first place. On the other hand, the AAP argues that based on the nation's experience this spring, remote learning is likely to result in severe learning loss and increased social isolation. Social isolation in turn can breed serious social, emotional, and health issues. Child and adolescent physical or sexual abuse, substance abuse, depression, and suicidal ideation. Furthermore, these impacts will be visited more severely on Black and Brown children, as well as low-income children and those with learning disabilities. The guidance for returning to in-person schooling includes a recommendation about physical distancing, cleaning and disinfection, hand washing, and using outdoor spaces whenever possible. The AAP argues that offering elementary school children the opportunity to go to school every day should be given due consideration over spacing guidelines if capacity is an issue. Schools should weigh the benefits of strict adherence to a 6 feet spacing rule between the students with potential downside if remote learning is the only alternative. And so it argues that masks are probably not practical for children younger than middle school unless they can wear a mask without increased face touching. The guidelines do note that adult school staff are more at risk compared to young children and need to be able to distance from other adults as much as possible. No in-person faculty meetings, no class visits by parents, and they emphasize the need to make accommodations for students who are medically fragile or have special health care needs or disabilities. However, these guidelines don't necessarily address the health concern of America's teachers or their willingness to return to in-person teaching. Federal data show nearly a third of teachers are over 50, putting them in a higher risk category when it comes to the disease. Fairfax County Public Schools in Virginia, for example, recently announced its reopening plans, offering families a choice between 2 days a week of in-person classes or an all-remote schedule, plus an extra intervention on a third day for students who need it. The county's 3 educator unions resisted, arguing a statement that remote learning should continue. Our educators are overwhelmingly not comfortable returning to schools, said Tina Williams, president of Fairfax County Federation of Teachers. They fear for their lives, the lives of their students, and the lives of their families. So, to me, this is huge. I've firsthand seen my older high schooler, he doesn't care and he'd rather stay home anyway, but my elementary school child, it has been greatly affected by us having to social distance and being at home and not being with her friends. Her anxiety level has gone just completely through the roof to where it's almost unbearable at times, the way that she is exhibiting her behavior. And she hears thunder and she thinks something bad's going to happen. She hears a motorcycle. She asks me 40 times a day if I'm okay. We ended up, I probably shouldn't tell her business, but we ended up putting her on Prozac a month ago because her anxiety is just so high that she started to exhibit body symptoms of stuff that was going on that wasn't there. Then I worry about my ability to teach as opposed to an educator's ability to teach is not what it needs to be. And I know that in the end, the governor may be making this decision for us and we may not have an answer that we want, but I would encourage us to, of course, protect the vulnerable in our county, in our schools, and in our children, but try to get back as much as we can to some normalcy so that these kids are happier and safer.
Thank you.
I'd like to say just something real quick on that.
Yes,
You know, in today's paper, you know, in this article, it says now that the year's over, talking about the experience of the learning, he said, despite the best efforts of teachers, virtual learning did not work, at least not uniformly, if it's 3 children in the elementary, middle, and high school are any indication. So I was kind of following what you were saying, but I also want to just, you know, for the people that may be reading or hearing about this meeting, you know, there's an election in November, and I don't want the public to think that we are making the rules. We're making the decisions. I mean, the public needs to realize that there's a whole host of bodies, the governor, DHHS, North Carolina High School Athletic Association. There are a bunch of people advising and telling us, and we are doing the best that we can. So there are 2 members that are up for election. I don't want the public to think that to take it out. If there's a decision they don't like, take it out on Blair, take it out on Asher. That's not the case. This is the best. I mean, this is my first round and first stint as school board, but very impressed with all the people here. We do as best we can. The administration, top notch. So please, if you don't like the way it comes down, don't say, oh gosh, it's the school board's fault. It's not. We're doing the best we can with the cards that we're dealt with. That was all.
Thank you, Mr. Goff. I appreciate it. Ms. Casey.
Are we gonna have anybody talk about the different plans?
I want to speak very quickly about it at the general operations, and then we'll really get in depth, hopefully on July, when we know which plan we will be on.
I got a question. How many schools do not have a school nurse?
I think right now we have 17. Do we have 17 with 23 schools?
17 that do or don't?
No,
No,
17
17
total
school
nurses.
nurses, I apologize.
Okay, that's
17
fine.
school nurses,
So maybe
Um,
5.
which meets some of the ratios. I think that when I'm talking to Steve Smith, it meets what the ratio recommended for the number of children per school nurse. Because you've got to remember, if you have 1 school nurse per school, that means that your large schools are not going to have the capabilities such as your smaller schools.
It's an ADM.
It's an
number.
ADM versus if it's 1 to a certain number, but, so yes.
Why I ask that question is all this temperature taking and everything, you know, are we gonna put what are we gonna do with the kids while the teachers or whoever's out there, you know, taking the temperature and stuff? And
We'll
a school nurse would be,
We'll get to that in general operations.
okay. And I think Jay took the same thing I did, the webinar, and that coming back to school, boy, they ask a lot of questions there that, you know, y'all need to watch that after Kathy. Is it gonna be, you said on the memorandum? Y'all might wanna read over that because it's got a lot, what's Jan? Yeah, it's got a lot in there about things that I don't know. You gotta have paper towels in the bathroom, you gotta have, you know, thermometers. Do we have a thermometer, that kind of thermometer at each school? Have we bought that, you know? And if we go back on, you know, A or B, we got to have that. So there's just lots of things that I think that would be good for y'all to read the webinar stuff.
Thank you, Ms. Casey. Anyone else?
I think I just want to add is just during this time, I asked the community to be patient with us. I know they're always wanting to know what's going on. This is a hard time, and to ask even for them to pray and send their positive thoughts to us and to even leaders in other areas during this time, because this is not an easy discussion or situation that we're dealing with.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Chairman Craven's reading of this thing that we're going to vote on, this message we're going to vote on today, and some of his comments have spurred some thoughts in my mind concerning the subject. I don't know, I hope several of you had a chance to read. I hope you're still reading the local papers, even though we get a lot of criticism for them. I think it was Sunday's editorial page of Bob Orr who, if I remember correctly, was one time a North Carolina justice.
Chief Justice.
Was he Chief
I think
Justice?
it was a Chief
And
Justice.
he is a local product of our local school systems. And we've produced a lot of fine people like that. He's one of the ones that's reached one of the highest levels in our state. But I thought he had an excellent column on the subject of Black Lives Matter and some other things related to that. But he says that he grew up in a segregated South, as I did. And some of the things that he's learning about now from the Black experience and Black history that he knew nothing about and learned nothing about in school when he came through Hendersonville High School, which is kind of usual, typical for that period of time. And I think that being an old history teacher, that it is important that we include all of our history in our history classes. I know I had a rare experience of growing up in a segregated South and a segregated school system, and the first African-American student at Auburn University attended it when I was there. And my third and fourth year of teaching, I had a really mind-altering and opening experience of teaching in an all-Black school in South Carolina, 1968 through 1970. And one of the things that I taught was Black history.
That's neat.
A white Southerner from South Alabama teaching Black history.
That is cool.
But it was really an experience, and to learn from my students. I'm still learning, and I've got a lot to learn, but that was, I wanted to share that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Good. All right, we're gonna move on to old business, of which we have none. So next up is gonna be Mr. Bernie Sosha. New business, which is the approval of the 2020-2021 interim budget resolution. Welcome.
I missed that. Good evening, you used to say.
Good afternoon. I kind of like that.
Yeah, I like that better too.
So yes, interim budget resolution. This is because we don't know when we're going to have a state budget this year. I had it go all the way through December. And what it is in here so that we can legally pay bills starting on the 1st of July. I based it on the current, from the state side, it's based on our current year's numbers, not really knowing exactly what our allotments are going to be. To get us halfway through the year from the state side. The local side, it is based on how much revenue we will receive. We know how much revenue we're going to get from the county by December, and then backing that into the expenditure sides, what we anticipate seeing through their federal budgets, as we know them to be the planning documents that DPI has sent to us this year. And the other restricted fund is, again, with the small revenues that we get that we put in the other restricted funds, prorating that through a December timeline. That has the biggest one in there is our Medicaid funding. Then with the enterprise funds, it is as best I could capture from this year with the differences that they had for the last quarter to anticipate what the first half of the year might look like for them. There's only a couple of lines in there anyway, but try and get enough dollars in there so we can make it through halfway. And then capital outlay is what we have from the county appropriation. It's the full budget is in here for capital outlay because a lot of it gets done early, and we have $150,000 of fund balance appropriated, which is projects from this year that are be carrying over the summer to get completed.
So
A lot of information in there.
the problem with it, I appreciate everything you've done. It's just,
Yes.
It's a
Yeah.
complete guess.
It is.
There's no way you could, it's a guess. And that's scary. With ADM and with everything that's gonna happen from August on, fines and forfeitures,
Yeah.
are we gonna see those anymore? I don't know.
Yeah, they're ready to
So,
low
but
for next year.
in this budget, you've got 150, from fund balance appropriated total, or how much is our fund balance?
That is just the current year projects that are
Current year.
ongoing that, I anticipate finishing up in the next year.
I noticed a little bit in there. You got what, 20 grand in child nutrition, 19,604.
Oh, right there, yeah, that's actually not fund balance, that's the other side of that, which is the fund transfer, that is, dollars that we will give from, the state that we're required to. The way the accounting of that works is we have to put in so much money of state dollars into the program.
Okay.
It shows up in that line.
And so it's a transfer, not
It's a
essentially
transfer,
a
yeah.
appropriation of, okay. So right now, in this interim, it's all carryover funds. There's not so much fund balance being used. So remind me again, what is our fund balance? Remind everybody else what our fund balance is gonna be, or where it stands.
It's about 2.3.
2.3 million.
Section 11, the capital outlay,
Uh-huh.
and that, you said that's for the year?
That is the capital budget from the county, the $1.9 million in the county budget that they're gonna allot us.
Through 2020.
Well, yeah, it still says the same thing in the little caption, that it's July 1 to December 31.
Yeah.
So it's a 6 months, or is it?
So I went ahead because I'm not sure exactly which projects will end up being done, so I have budgeted the entirety of it. for
And it might
the
carry
entire
over to
year,
2021.
to show all of the capital projects in there.
So I have a couple of, just go ahead and say I don't know, because I know that's what you're gonna tell me, but, so say that the governor comes back tomorrow and he says, okay, I'm gonna allow you half capacity. And we have to run 2 bus, like normally if we ran 2 bus routes for the school, we're running 4 bus routes because we can only fill our buses half capacity. Have you heard, like, they're gonna give us money for, because that's double gas, double, go ahead, I don't know.
Well, I do know that I've not heard anything about them giving us any money for that.
Yeah, if we are required to only have, 1 kid per seat, you have to skip every other seat. There's been some calculations up there that it could cost us 7 figures to deal with that gas increase alone. Not to mention picking kids up at 4 in the morning and dropping them off at
Right.
9 o'clock at night.
And staff costs, because you gotta think about.
Well, there's
dollars.
that as well. Yeah. So there's a big.
Yeah, the transportation piece
It's
is
going to be fun.
a huge question mark. Well, among many. but
I think child
that's-
nutrition as well, because if we're only
Right.
doing half the time, and are we still? We would like to feed our kids
Yeah,
every
we
day.
have
So
to
how do
feed
we
them
feed our
anyway.
kids every day?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd still have to go out
If
and
they're
help out.
if they're coming for 1 week, then we got to go feed these kids this week, or however that's going to work.
Yeah, and I think that's why we did some work and certainly some great work by Dr. King and the CARES Act funding.
Yeah.
That we wrote it as general as we could make it.
Yeah.
To be able to plug in on what we need, because our CARES Act, Bernie, is how much that we get in?
$2.5 million.
$2.5 million. So we have $2.5 million that when we tell the state that, yes, we need more money in transportation, we need more money in child nutrition, we're going to have more substitutes to take care of, because if you divide a class in half, teacher stays with one half, who goes to the other, we need more personnel. The answer we get is, oh, you've got CARES Act money. So therefore, unfortunately, I'm afraid we're going to just have to watch it and budget, because it's going to go just like this. It's going to be spent because we've looked at transportation, and so we've had Fred run numbers of 1 per seat, and if we did just straight 50% at all the schools, what would it cost? And so you could run through CARES Act money very quickly, just in transportation alone.
Yeah.
So we're looking at CARES Act. Once again, we do have $400,000 in local that by hopefully by December, we'll know more and we can certainly will bring to you in case, because we use that for COVID too. So that's local dollars. So right now, this budget is you're right. So it's the unknown and which plan. If we're on option C, and I told this kid we'll get to it, but if we're on option C where kids are not there, eventually we're going to have to get the hand sanitizer, but we don't have to spend money on it right now. We need to purchase more of online stuff. But if we're on option A, every kid's there, then we better buy I think we're looking at gallon jugs, putting gallon jugs in every classroom. So there are things there that we're waiting to pull the trigger once we know more on where we need to prioritize in our budget on what we need to do.
Can we, I know that we don't know what's going on, but once that happens, would you mind sharing some of that information with us when
Sure.
we get that time, so we at least can kind of help advocate to certain people?
But yeah, absolutely. And then I think this year's more so than most years, we're going to see Mr. Socha down here
A lot.
with amendments to this budget. There's going to be constant. You know, if there's another CARES Act passed here in the end of July or something, then that could be a whole other thing. Who knows?
Yeah, there will be a lot of CARES Act amendments because it is a federal pot of money, which requires us to treat it completely different than if it were state or local dollars.
So I appreciate you taking your magical ball and shaking it up.
He's usually
and then,
right.
And then getting it on here.
Well, this is just so he can pay bills for the
That's
next couple
all
of
it
months.
is.
I mean,
That's
that's
all it
really
is.
all we know. You got to pay
Yep.
the bills. Tomorrow's July 1. You got to
Absolutely.
pay the bills.
Well,
So whatever we pass, we can adjust.
we can
as he
amend
will
at any
bring
point
it
in time.
to us.
and we'll be back here in 2 weeks.
I'm
So,
sure that's right.
Yes, you will.
so I'll take a motion whenever somebody's ready.
I move that we approve the 2021 interim budget resolution as presented.
Second.
All right, Mr. Egoff, yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Asher?
Yes.
Ms. Holt?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Wood? Ms. Corn?
Yes.
And Ms. Case?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. It passes. All right, next up is going to be federal funds sole source procurement. Mr. Socha.
Well, speaking of federal funds, they come with lots of rules and procedures that we have to follow, this being one of them. With the $10,000 threshold for bidding requirements for anything now, there is, as we've done this before, this is the sole source request. So if there are companies for some of our federal grants that we are wanting to do business with that are being deemed the sole source, we have to get DPI to approve them. And as you see the list of there in the backup documentation where we have requested them to approve them as sole source so that when we try to spend our federal dollars, that we can go straight to these companies and purchase without having to go through the normal solicitation process. Most of these are the same from last year. There are a couple that are new, and there probably will be a couple more that will come down the pike in the coming months as we get into operation, especially with the CARES money that is federal, and we don't know what we're going to need or who we're going to be able to get stuff from. So if there are some vendors that will end up being sole source, we will bring those to you as quickly.
Which ones of these are new?
Was it Striven and Panorama? Are those the ones? Yes.
And what do they provide?
Very good question.
Panorama, student support and academic enrichment.
Dr. King has her ready to answer.
Yes, come on.
Panorama is student social emotional support products. We've never used them before, but given COVID-19, we know that's a possibility moving into next school year. And Striven, we're changing platforms for our career technical planning software.
Okay.
Students have the opportunity to virtually job shadow versus face-to-face job shadow.
Oh, that's cool.
So the only one that I'd like to know, really get more in depth with is the curriculum associates, because it's for the biggest chunk of change. It's over $209,000. The rest of them are pretty much under 40 grand or so. Can you explain a little bit about that to me?
Yes, sir. That's our iReady product for K-8.
That's their business name is Curriculum
Yes,
Associates.
It is
Gotcha.
our iReady.
All right, thank you. All right, does anyone else have any other questions? No. All right, I'm going to take a motion, but before I do, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote as I am on the board of the Boys and Girls Club of Henderson County. And being that we're taking these all as a whole, I feel it's appropriate that I recuse myself from this vote. So with that being said, I will take a motion when someone's ready.
I move that the Henderson County Board of Public Education approve the list of specified vendors under the sole source exemption guidelines.
Second,
All right, Mr. Egoff,
Yes.
Mr. Asher,
yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Corn,
Yes.
and Ms. Case.
Yes.
And I abstain. It passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Social.
Thank you, guys.
All right, next up is going to be consent for utility easement for Hendersonville High School. Duke Power wants to move some power lines. Dr. Bryant.
Man, that school is crazy. Have you driven by
I've
it?
seen the
I
steel
saw
and
it
steel is
yesterday.
up and
It looks awesome.
my son, I drove my son by and saw the parade. He's looking out the window, you know,
It is
it's
cool.
coming along.
It is, and we are proud of that work. And as part of that work, it's critical that they have power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The school and the people that are doing the work. And so you'll see on the cover page here for you specifically, this has already been reviewed by Campbell Shatley and council with regard to the county. But in short, Duke Energy has asked for Henderson County to grant an easement in order that they are able to complete the work, hook up the power specifically to where it's going to be received as the main generator line. And then they also have some removal that they need to do. They have to kind of reset some lines, offset them because there's going to be a turning lane coming in from 25. So you, of course, have had the opportunity, I'm sure, to take a look at the easement specifically and the legalese associated with that. I would really draw your attention to the very last page of this information. Thank you, Mr. McMurray. One more page down, if you don't mind. That's just the map. Oh, that's the page I need. There you go. And so you'll see that there's a relocation, that line in red that's coming off 25. You see the large line that sort of runs under both the Boyd property and the school property itself right now, and then a temporary overhead line where they're doing work toward where the new facility is going to be. This is certainly in line with what we'd expect to happen during this period of time, and Duke Energy needs the ability and the right to access that at any time for any reason in order that they would be able to continue to maintain power. I will say, and I think Mr. Caldwell will back me up on this, we're very fortunate. We have a great relationship with Duke Energy when it comes down to our needs as a school system. If power goes out at a school, they are very responsive when we need them. And so while that's not specific to this easement, I'll say that we recognize the need for them to be able to address that.
Yeah, we should be writing them big checks. So
We
they,
do.
Yes, we do.
they should respond very quickly.
We do.
So tell me, in this picture, the underground primary, is that what they're gonna, that's gonna be the new main once they build the turn lane and get all that?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. And then the temporary line, the overhead line that's coming
It will
across
come.
Bearcat will be yanked out of there.
Yes, sir.
Is that gonna affect, they've got all that scaffolding up right there.
Yeah, it shouldn't because they're working in concert with that right now. But I believe that that side is supposed to be scheduled for finish as soon as the easement is granted because that was the side that they started on.
Sure.
You'll likely see scaffolding on the rest of the building when that line goes up.
So what exactly, I know that doesn't have to do with this, what is repointing the brick? What are they doing exactly to it?
So a couple of things that were going on is the mortar started to fail in some places, which causes it to receive water. And then once it starts to receive water, the bricks actually act, as I have learned, like sponges. And then once they start to act like sponges, they expand, they contract, which start to cause problems with all of the jointing. So essentially they take all of that out. They make sure that they can, that the brick is serviceable and needs to stay where it is. And then they remortar all the joints. And so it creates, again, a new waterproof barrier is the simple way that I would describe it. Because we were having water issues, especially on several corners of the auditorium space. You could see it bleeding through the walls. It would almost suck the water into the brick and then let it out inside the building.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
If you go by there now, you can actually see the three phases that they're in. You can see on the right side where this picture is, you can see where it's done.
And it
And then the
looks almost
front,
lighter,
it looks
doesn't it? It
lighter.
looks nicer.
And then in the middle, you'll see that they've taken the mortar out.
Oh, okay,
And then on the left side, you can see where the old mortar is.
okay.
And so in a lot of ways, it's new.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what it
one of the
looks like
features
on that
was
right side.
Keep it that way, but we knew one of the critical elements is the exterior of the building has received the most, weather, has been treated the most harshly. And to continue to utilize that building when it is fully renovated and inside, it was really critical that you address all the elements on the outside. And so, yeah, as you can watch
That's pretty cool.
if you kind of had I'll share with you all, we've got a camera that is on the site right now that is taking regular pictures of all the work that's going on. It's kind of an earth cam. But one of the things that I've asked Mr. Parent to do is actually kind of taking pictures of work at variety of stages. And so almost like the old flip books we had, you'd be able to sort of see it all.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's cool.
Any other questions? All right, I'll take the motion.
I move that the Henderson County Board of Public Education approve the consent for utility easement at Hendersonville High School as presented.
That was Ms. Holt. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Absher, Mr. Eagle, yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Absher,
Yes.
Ms. Holt,
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Ms. Corn,
Yes.
Ms. Case,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. Thank you very much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Brown.
Thank you.
All right, the last thing on our agenda today is going to be general operations from our superintendent. It's going to cover a lot of things, so take it away, sir.
Thank you. First, give you a little history, Ms. Holt, about the auditorium at Hendersonville High School. Back in my days of the facilities guy, Dr. Bryan is right. That wall is almost like a sponge. And when you go in there, unfortunately, the inside is plaster. So all of a sudden, you can just go in there and you can just start hitting the
Sure.
bubbles with the plaster and you can just start
It
crumbling.
would bubble out.
Wow.
Bubble out. The woodwork that when you walk into the auditorium, you see the bottom of the woodwork is not there just for looks. It's because basically we were losing plaster because of the wall that was just so saturated. It was just so bubbled down through there that we had to put something up. So fortunate now with the relationship that you have developed with the county to provide funding for that, because unfortunately, if you remember during those times, our budget was a shoestring and some, a tinfoil and a paper clip to make things work. And so we kept trying to just put chemicals on. It would be just some type of chemical we would put on to stop the moisture. And unfortunately, that's one of those that gets very expensive because it works for just a short period of time. You've got to reapply it. Funding would go out. So we're so fortunate that funding is there to fix it and to fix it right. And that is the beauty of that, because we worked hard to try to fix it, but it was almost like a little mash unit, just trying to stop the bleeding as best we could. And now it's going to be done and done correctly. And done right. So let's talk about where we are in this case. Yes, as I told you, we're waiting for the click, and here's the click. Here's all your questions. I know you've got them. I do want to let you know that we're just going to talk in general, because right now in July, when we meet in July, hopefully we know more about what our plan will be. And Mr. Eagle, thank you for your comments. You're exactly right. I have people emailing me, are you going to let our children come back to school in August? It's not Bo Caldwell's decision as superintendent. It's not you as a Board of Education. It is the state's decision on what they will provide to us that we must abide by. Speaking of that, some changes you're going to see right now. Executive Order 147, of course, is the mask that he came up with, other different things, but mask is one of them. We are going to send out a message to all of our schools that visitors coming into the building now must wear masks. That we didn't require that at first, but with this Executive Order 147, we're going to wear masks in the building here. As long as there's a possibility we're within 6 feet of someone. If we're not within 6 feet of someone, we will not wear the mask. In other words, personally, I will wear a mask into the building. I'll wear it going down the hallway. When I get into my office, I will not wear the mask. And that's what we're going to require at all of our schools. So if you hear someone saying, what's up with why can't I get to the school without a mask now? Well, it's because of Executive Order 147 by the governor. That leads us to the decision. And I can tell you the work that we've already started doing with the decision. Hopefully it will be tomorrow. That's what I'm hearing. It's going to be July 1st. Mr. Absher has kind of talked to me and in this group that he thinks it may be delayed, so I don't know. We'll see what happens, and I hope not, Mr. Absher, and because we need to know. Because right now, this is what we started doing. We created a website. Okay, when I say a website, it will just be an off of our original website. We're calling this Return to Learn, okay? We did learn from home. So now let's talk about Return to Learn, all right? And what does Return to Learn look like? And as we've already talked about, the state has given us a document. DHHS gave us a document. I read it. It was, I think, 17 pages of requirements and suggestions on option A, option B, option C. Option A, of course, you got to remember is that's when all children are going to be in the building at one time. Business as usual, as best as we can. Option B, Plan B, either term you want to use, is basically children you can have is up to 50%. You can have less, but you cannot have any more than the capacity of 50% of that building at one time. C, remote learning, okay, is where we are, that students cannot enter the building. Now, hopefully this week we will hear Henderson County, you're going to be on Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C, so we can start planning. So have we started planning? So what have we been doing since then? We've been planning, okay? We have 7, I believe I counted them, is it 7 groups? 7 groups that we have, basically 7 committees that we have out there working with principals, assistant principals, people from the community, helping us plan on different options. Scott Massington, I mentioned Ms. Holt during break there, that Scott Massington, when he was hired as our safety coordinator, did not realize that right now he's fighting an unknown enemy of COVID-19. He's gone from planning lockdown drills to looking at how we can get kiosks to take temperatures of children when they walk through to help us get the students in the building faster, and looking at samples and looking at different aspects of safety for our children and safety for our employees. He's heading up the safety committee. We have a human resources committee. We have a remote learning committee. So we've got committees out there right now meeting 2 to 3 times a week, looking at their schools and going through, in this case, the same questions that you just asked. The committee's job is they're getting into the weeds. They're getting into how are we going to take the temperatures for every child walking into the building? What happens if a child gets sick? What happens if it's 101 temperature? What happens? What happens about the bus? Are we going to take temperatures on the bus? These are recommendations from the committee that will come to the committee chairs. The committee chairs then will put a master plan together, and then we will present it to you. Okay? Now, once again, it's hard work because we're doing 3 different plans. How great it would be if we could truly start concentrating on one plan at this time. I have heard from parents, and I do want you as a board to be able to share. This will be on the Return to Learn page, that if it is Plan B, which is 50% or less, if it is Plan A, but as a parent, I still feel uncomfortable about sending my child to school. Through the great work of Dr. King and a committee on her staff, as she is looking at providing remote learning for those students that they can stay at home but still be with us as Henderson County Public Schools. If it is B or A, we will have another option for those parents. And that's big for us, and that is where we're going to start looking at it.
But I think that's what we have to have, because first of all, we all have to realize, and we all do realize it, that we're not going to make everybody happy. We're gonna upset a big group of people, and it's like you guys are saying. I mean, it's coming down from the governor's orders on whether the masks are required or not required. We're in school, we're not in school. I think the biggest thing is with B, there's so many more unknowns. 50%. So what does that mean? Do we need to reimagine the way that we use our school buildings? You and I have talked, and I truly believe that it's vitally important to keep those kids that are K through 2, K through 5 even, in school every day to learn. I'm not equipped to handle my 5-year-old son, his learning ability, like teaching him to read. I tried, but Miss Shandival would do a much better job than I would. So be patient with us. We're going to try to get this thing worked out as much as possible. but there's gonna be a lot of hiccups in this road.
But you're exactly right, and Dr. Bryant, I believe that's Dr. Bryant's committee, I believe, is to look at different options.
I
I
don't
believe
know, how do we do that?
he's got option A, option B, option C. I think right now he has several different options, because you're right. One of the options is try to bring back kindergarten through fifth grade, but yet you can't social distance. We've got classrooms that are small. You'd have to almost bring back K through 3, could use the gym, use the cafeteria to separate those children if it's plan B, and then move those students to Hendersonville Middle School, 4th and 5th, because once again, you've got to remember it's 50%. Well, it's 50% of that building, so you'll have to take those children out if you bring them every day and put them in another facility. We've got some superintendents that are doing kids 2 days a week, Monday and Tuesday, to have the other half on Wednesday and Thursday, and then we're using Friday as a remediation type day. We have some groups who are bringing in kindergartners, 6th graders, and 9th graders for a certain period of time, because that is the transition time, and bringing them face to face and everyone. It is handed a plan. And to be honest with you, as superintendent, I have voiced my concern to the governor's office that Plan B is extremely, extremely difficult.
There's just so much.
There is so much to it. And you're right. And we're going to do a survey. Once we know what we're doing, we've got a parent survey ready to go to talk to parents, but we're not sending the survey out yet because I don't want them to get confused, because what we're surveying, some of the questions may be, if we're on Plan C, then it really doesn't, for you, do you want to stay home? Well, you're staying home. So we're holding the survey to wait to see what options are going to come to us and what options we're on, and then survey. Because if we're on option B, I want to know if we, from elementary parents, is it better to do weeks at a time and then be off a week? Or is it better to do a Monday, Wednesday, or is it better to do a Monday, Tuesday? Those are types of things that we'll need to know, especially from the elementary folks, parents who are there on what would be the best if we can only do 50%.
Yeah, I think when you think about the 50%, that's going to relate just to the building's size, correct?
Correct.
And so we get to dictate what that 50% actually looks like. And for me, I think the hardest thing is that parents, kids that are 12, 11 and under are not allowed in the state of North Carolina to stay by themselves, right? And so they have to have childcare of some sort. And if you have a parent that's working and they're actively going to work now, what are they going to do for childcare? How do we do that? How do we say, okay, I can work this week but not next week because my kid's got school? Oh wait, that kid's got school this week but not this week. So wait. Oh, now I need 2 weeks of care because both of them were on opposite schedules. I think we need to make sure that in those early formative years that kids are learning to read, and it really helps the parents really with the child care. And my son in the older grades, 8th grade, 9th grade, they're a lot better on the virtual stuff than it would be to teach my son to read.
It's hard for me to figure out how we can have childcare. Those early, especially those early years, and we can't have school. I just don't.
You can't. In other words, if we're on Plan B and if we say that we're bringing to an option of going to go 50%, then that means that Bruce Drysdale can only have 50% of their children there. So therefore, 50% is it. So the other 50% will be at home for parents to have to do. Basically, they're back to learn at home versus return to learn.
Well, what I was reading, that's when I think we need to reimagine our space. We have 2 million square feet of space. A high school might not be a high school next year or during this term. A high school might need to take care of our EC kids and kids with some other learning difficulties, and maybe some of our middle school kids. Maybe our middle schools, they have a capacity of 1,000, 1,200 kids, ends up being 4th and 5th grade. I don't know, we need to think outside the box.
Well, and that's the beauty, and that's why I certainly appreciate this team behind me, because I said, look, it's either gonna be our decision, and they looked around and said, look, we all know the brains that we have here, they're good ones, but we need some more minds working on this, and that's why we got as many people on this committee to start sharing, to think outside the box, because when you start collaboration and working, you start coming up with different ideas. To be honest, Plan B, we have 3 or 4. There's no reason for me to start sharing with these, because I certainly don't want them to be printed, because that's not what we're a long way away from that. We are working out the details. I know you did ask about the thermometer question. That's why I've got right now a committee looking at that solely on temperatures. And there's also an assertion paper or something I think the parents have to fill out. Is that daily? Is that weekly? We've got to get answers on that. What happens if a kid doesn't?
How do you do it on the bus?
And how do you do it on the bus? These are all different types of recommendation the committee is going to bring to us. I did tell the committee chair yesterday, if we're on Plan B or we're on Plan A, I don't want to look out there the very first day and have our high school kids stretched out 6 feet apart all the way through the parking lot waiting to get into the school. We've got to get this done, and we got to get this done right. That's why he's looking at some kiosks, and you asked about the number of thermometers. The state did release a certain number of thermometers per school district, and they're purchasing those, that we did not have to take that out of CARES Act money. And I'm trying to remember, I just saw the swim today. You got thermometers today. You remember how many? 138 thermometers that we
One
received.
per what?
Okay.
100 kids?
Yes, pretty much 100 kids is how they divvied it up. So we have 138 to start. Do we need more? Sure we do. We got to have more. And that's why we may use some of the CARES Act money to look at kiosks, to look to see how we get people through. Because it's not just our children, it's also our staff has to have their temperature taken. Every visitor, the UPS man, the maintenance worker, parent come to check their child out for the dentist has to have their temperature taken before they can.
Does that person, especially, we were asking about the school nurses, let's say it's the front office person. Is there training? I know everybody knows how to use a thermometer, but let's say they let somebody in that does have a fever or ends up having COVID or something like that. How do we handle that? Like they let somebody in that had a fever.
Well, we certainly hope that doesn't happen, but there will be protocol that all of a sudden if they do take the temperature and there is 100, it's 101, then there's quickly protocol on where you move the child, where you move to the adult. You've got to exclude them, you got to quarantine them.
That was in the DHHS
Yeah, and
thing,
that, I was
wasn't it?
meaning, what if somebody misses it? I mean, because you're gonna have some things that are
Yeah.
it's humans, right? And are they
You have to
liable
have a
for that
plan.
all of a sudden?
Our goal right now is 100%. That's our goal.
That'd be crazy.
I think if we have a choice, Plan A or Plan B, that you're very wise to have Dr. King and her committee working on that virtual option, because there will be some people that don't want to risk it yet. And we've learned a lot this spring in virtual education the hard way, but we need to have that option because we need to keep those kids in our school system.
True. Now, as a decision that you can make, and please, as you can, once we are given an option, you have the option that you can go down. You can't move up. So in other words, if the governor says we're on Plan B, you as a school board can say, we won't Plan C. If you're on A, you can go to B. You just can't say, if he says you can have 50% of your children there, we want A. That's basically according to the guidelines that are provided, we can't do as a board of education.
Out of curiosity, I know like hypothetically, if we did Plan B and we need more space, have we thought about reaching out to even like some of our church institutions that have large amount of space that we can possibly use?
And I'll have to, and I'm not sure, I've
What
not
the
heard
guidelines
the committee report yet. I know that Dr. Brian and I have talked about different scenarios. I think, Michael, when you start looking at 50%, I think that once you get 50% there, we can pretty well, with 50% social distance inside the classrooms with using auxiliary spaces to put kids 6 feet apart. If you say that you have Flat Rock Middle School of 800 kids, you'll bring 400 in, then yes, we can look at spacing those 400 using the variety of spaces to make sure they're 6 feet apart. I'm not sure. I think what Mr. Craven is talking, let's say that you decided to bring in K through 5 every day. Well, if you bring in all of them every day, then you can't social distance. You're going to have to use other facilities to take care of that if you bring those children in every day.
Yeah, that's why I was just saying.
Yeah.
I don't know if it might be feasible because we do have large churches close
Yeah.
by to some schools.
We do, but right now, we're just looking at what we can do within our, in our facilities to make sure it works.
A lot of the problem with that is, we've gone through a lot of hard work over the last 3 years to make our schools as safe as possible. Double point entry and everything else, and then when you start getting into using other people's space, you get into a whole nother ball of wax.
But a lot of those larger churches have already put a lot of those safety
Yeah, I'm
things.
not sure I'd be okay with.
Well, and of
Yeah,
course,
we
then
have,
it comes to the cleaning and once our children go in there, because cleaning is gonna be an issue. Once you have a child,
Big issue.
once you have a child who leaves a space and another one comes in, that space needs to be clean. We've got the committee looking at that, how many, instead of children moving different classrooms, than if the child stayed in the same area and the teacher came to them versus the child going to different classrooms, would certainly cut down. These are things that we will bring to you, but Mr. Craven, you said it exactly. There's not going to be a perfect plan. There's not going to, for the parent who all of a sudden for a 50%, and for the parent who has a middle school and a high school child, and we do all elementary, they're not going to be happy. If we do 50%, nobody's going to be happy because it's going to be, there's nothing that we can do.
That's 100%.
And it's almost somebody as the superintendent from Wake County that's the largest school system in North Carolina. Basically, put it, it's almost going to be pick your poison because which one is going to hurt the most in this, because it's nothing that we can do unless it's plan A and we're back and everything is good. Besides that, it's going to be difficult.
Well, and I mean, if you look at it from the parent's perspective, I worry about those families. You're going to have kids that are home that are 8 years old because their mom has to go to work and they're home alone. You're going to have parents that are going to lose their job because, you're on this week, you're off this week. And I mean, it's not that we're saying that because we want to be difficult. It's just because we're doing a 50% capacity. There's nothing we can do.
That's why I think you have to have the younger kids go every day.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really hard and tough for some of these families on, if we're not allowed and we have to remote, that's super hard. I mean,
I'll be honest, I don't know what I would do. Like, who's going to come and watch our kids?
Right.
I have no idea.
Have you looked at, so if we have to go with remote, in that plan, are you guys looking at a daycare plan for parents that have to work? You know how like we had the emergency daycare for first responders and, so forth this last time? Will you?
Right now, we have not received guidance about that because at last they told us when we were on remote, the state gave us permission to open up some childcare. So that's why we did. Right now, we have not received that guidance from the state that we can open up our schools for childcare. And it's always kind of when Ms. Corn, you're saying it's not safe enough to come.
I know.
It's
I
not
believe you.
Childcare in school.
What's
It's
the
not
difference?
safe enough.
Exactly.
Oh, I
That
believe
makes
that
no sense.
wholeheartedly,
Yes.
but the state
Yes.
allowed it.
Yeah, they did, but I'm not sure that this time if they
If
will
they
or not.
will.
Because the criteria is going to change if we are on Plan C. And if I bring to you on July 13th that the governor says Harrison County Public Schools is on Plan C, then Dr. King will spend a lot of time with you talking about Plan C, because Plan C is going to look entirely different than it did the first time.
Mhm.
Because Plan C this time is attendance has got to be taken.
Right.
Grades are going to be given. You got to remember last time, you remember the child said, well, look, I had a B on March the 14th, and all I can do is improve it or it can't go down.
PC 19.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And Mr. Craig and I talked about our childhoods and thinking, what would we, how would we attack?
Like
how would we attack that?
WWJD,
I gotta be very careful because one of my former teachers is sitting here. He says, I know how exactly what he was doing. Anyhow, that's not gonna happen. The children are gonna have to earn grades this time, and it's no more of a safety net. So therefore, if we are on C, C is gonna look different than it did last time in different ways. Now, some of the strategies will still be the same, presentation will still be the same if we're on C. I wish I had an answer. I mean, somebody says, well, did you get a hint? I don't have a hint. I don't
I
have a
know.
clue.
know.
I really don't know. And I know that's frustrating. I know I've had people that ask me, True, are kids coming back? I don't know. I know that right now that we're opening up for some workouts, but it's very limited on some workouts. I even had somebody, we're going to have high school football on Friday night. I need to know. Once again, I feel like as superintendent, I would love to bring you answers right now because I feel like I'm letting you down as a Board of Education that I don't.
No,
But right now, there's no answers that I can give you about what plan we're on until I get the plan. But I will tell you this, once we get the plan, we've got committees in place that we're going to bring you the best plan we can bring you for the safety of our children and the safety of our staff.
Well, I'm gonna tell you that I would have no one else would I want working on this than this group sitting right here.
Yep.
I have total confidence in the screwed up mess we're in, that y'all are gonna do the very best that is humanly possible.
here.
And from the teacher's point of view, administrator, the person in the school responsible for the safety of these children, if you think, or the governor thinks, or any committee thinks that you're going to be able to keep these children 6 feet apart,
It's crazy.
they just don't know what they're talking
You can't
about.
keep adults 6 feet apart.
No.
Well, in adding on that, and I kind of wanted to piggyback on what you just said about the sports thing. Unfortunately, if we have social distancing guidelines and you're 6 feet apart, how do you play football?
Can't play volleyball, football.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
I do not know.
How do we wrestle? Wrestle. How do we do it?
Mr. Rhodes can tell us.
I saw some of the guidelines on the baseballs and how they're disinfecting balls. You can't throw it. Yeah, I guess you just got to throw it up and catch it yourself. I don't even know. We appreciate everything that you guys do.
Yeah.
Amen. It's going to be, thank you, Mr. Session. It's going to be a difficult year, and it's a lot on your shoulders, and hopefully we can be here to help you out,
Not
hinder
get
you-
your way.
hinder you in any way.
So the plans that you guys are working on now, are you going with the DHHS recommendations and then the DPI recommendations that we originally read that, were so long that masks are recommended but not required? Is that what we're going off of?
Right now, we're going off and I think that the mask and see is going to be changed or not changed. I know that he did the executive order for 147. I'll see if that plan has been updated or not. I've not had a chance to look at it since, to be honest with you, with all the Zoom meetings, go-to meetings and those type of things. I think that will be something that we will certainly discuss because is it required or recommended? And they laid out required, recommended. And so we'll just bring to you what we feel like will be required and what's recommended, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any questions?
Ms. Case, did I answer
That was
your
a long
question?
itself.
Can you tell me the 7 committees?
The names of the 7 committees,
Or
I'll
what
tell you,
they are.
I'll have Dr. Bryant send you the name of the 7 committees and who's chair of each one of those and go from there. Okay, I'll just send you the list of them. Okay?
All right, for our next meeting, I believe it's July 13th.
July 13th.
Right here, it's at, 1 o'clock closed and 2 o'clock, open meeting. But I will accept a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, appreciate your having to change at the last minute.
Are we still live?
We miracle that out.
We're still on.
Flexibility.
We're still live.
I won't be here.